April 5th, 2020. The world is in chaos. Empty streets, crashing markets, fear spreading faster than the virus itself. While most people scramble for answers and solace, one man is already moving, long before the sun has risen. Jocko Willink stands in the dim glow of his home gym at 4:30 a.m., sweat dripping from his brow, eyes locked in focus. It's a scene that hasn't changed in years. Pandemic or no pandemic, he rises, he trains, he leads. While the world is falling apart, Jocko remains unshaken. But his strength doesn't come from an iron will alone. It's the result of a philosophy rooted in the wisdom of ancient Rome, carried through the centuries to this moment. Drawing on the teachings of Stoics like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, Jocko has turned self-discipline into a weapon, one capable of not only surviving, but thriving in the face of uncertainty. As businesses fold, as leaders crumble under the weight of the unknown, Jocko is calm, methodical, and prepared. Not just a Navy SEAL commander or an author, he is a modern Stoic, leading a quiet revolution in how we face adversity. And in a world where anxiety reigns, his discipline is proving to be the ultimate counterattack. Chapter 1. Calm in the Eye of the Storm. Imagine it's April 2020. The world is paralyzed by fear, economies buckle, and confusion seeps into every corner of life. Uncertainty is the new normal. Yet, while the world spins out of control, Jocko Willink's alarm goes off at 4:30 a.m. sharp. He gets up without hesitation. The darkness of the morning doesn't faze him. It never has. Why? Because Jocko knows something most people don't. Control comes from within. It would be easy to surrender to the chaos, to let anxiety take hold. Instead, Jocko leans into his routine, a ritual of discipline he's refined for years. His early morning workouts are not just physical, they're mental, designed to build resilience. Each lift, each mile, each drop of sweat is a conscious act of resistance against the world's unpredictability. This isn't new. Jocko's approach is ancient, rooted in the philosophy of Stoicism. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, lived in times of political strife, war, and turmoil. Yet, they found a way to remain steady, to find peace in the eye of the storm. Their key insight? You can't control what happens around you, but you can always control how you respond. Jocko embodies this principle. When most are overwhelmed by the pandemic, he focuses inward, building a fortress in his mind. The storm rages, but his thoughts are calm. Like Marcus Aurelius on the battlefield, Jocko understands that his real fight isn't with the virus or the collapsing economy. It's with himself. The world's chaos cannot touch him. Why? Because he owns his mind, his habits, his actions. For Jocko, discipline equals freedom, not just freedom from external chaos, but from the internal turmoil that consumes so many. While others are paralyzed by fear, Jocko moves forward, quietly rewriting what it means to lead in times of crisis. But what Jocko does isn't just about personal mastery. As we'll see, it's a philosophy that's about to catch fire in a world desperate for answers. And as we dive deeper, we'll uncover how this ancient wisdom has the power to reshape modern leadership, starting with Jocko. Chapter 2. Extreme ownership in the crisis. Imagine you're leading a team through a crucial project at work. The stakes are high, the deadline is looming, and things start to go wrong. People look for someone to blame. Fingers point. The pressure mounts. What do? Most would scramble for excuses, deflect responsibility, and look outward for a solution. But Jocko Willink, he does something different. He owns it all. Jocko's leadership mantra, extreme ownership, means taking full responsibility, no matter what. Whether it's a Navy SEAL mission or a business project, if something goes wrong, it's on you. No excuses, no exceptions. The year 2020 was the ultimate test of this philosophy. The world was in free fall, businesses struggled to survive, and even Jocko's own ventures felt the strain. Contracts evaporated, revenue plunged, and his team looked to him for answers. For most, this would have been the perfect time to look outward, to blame the pandemic, the government, or the market. But Jocko didn't waver. He doubled down on extreme ownership. He asked himself, what could I have done better? How can I adapt to this new reality? He didn't wait for external circumstances to improve. Instead, he adjusted his approach, constantly evaluating what he and his team could control. Jocko knew that ownership wasn't about avoiding failure. It was about taking responsibility for how you respond to it. But here's the catch. Extreme ownership is easy in theory, but brutally hard in practice. Imagine captaining a ship through calm waters. It's easy to steer, easy to stay on course. But when the storm hits, when the waves threaten to pull you under, that's when true leadership is tested. The pandemic was Jocko's storm. As businesses around him folded and people panicked, Jocko held the line. His team followed his example, recalibrating, adapting, and pressing forward. Extreme ownership became more than just a leadership principle. It became a lifeline. And as more leaders watched Jocko navigate through the storm, they began to adopt the same mindset. They realized that blaming the storm wouldn't help. Owning their response would. Yet, even as Jocko led his team through these choppy waters, the true test of his philosophy was still on the horizon. The worst of the storm had passed, but the challenges were far from over. Would extreme ownership be enough to face what came next? Chapter 3. The Long Road to Recovery. The storm had passed, or so it seemed. As the dust began to settle, the immediate chaos of the pandemic was fading. Businesses started to reopen, and people cautiously returned to their routines. But for many, the aftermath felt just as unsettling as the crisis itself. Surviving the initial storm wasn't the end of the battle, it was just the beginning. For Jocko, this was a crucial phase. While others were tempted to breathe a sigh of relief and relax, he knew that this period was when discipline mattered most. The temptation to let your guard down, to return to old habits, was strong. But Jocko saw things differently. Recovery is the real test of resilience. Complacency kills, he reminded those who were listening. The world was far from normal, and the challenges weren't over. The economy was fragile, businesses were still under pressure, and uncertainty lingered. In these moments, leadership wasn't about reacting to crisis. It was about strategic patience and consistent effort. The same discipline that got you through the storm was what would keep you moving forward. Imagine leading a team through a massive crisis. Now that the dust has settled, there's a feeling of relief. But with relief comes danger. The danger of losing the edge, of letting complacency creep in. This is where the true test begins. Can you maintain the discipline when the immediate threat is gone? Jocko focused on reinforcing the fundamentals: structure, routine, and accountability. He knew that rebuilding wasn't about dramatic changes. It was about doing the small things right every single day. Consistency over time would determine who thrived in the recovery and who fell behind. This was the quiet work, the grind that came after the adrenaline rush of the crisis had worn off. For some leaders, it was a wake-up call. The road to recovery wasn't going to be fast, and it wasn't going to be easy. But for those who stuck to the principles of extreme ownership, there was one certainty. They controlled their actions, and their actions would determine their future. The world was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. This phase was about more than survival. It was about building a foundation for long-term success, and Jocko's philosophy was the blueprint. Chapter 4: Bold Moves for a New World. As businesses began to find their footing, it became clear that the world they were operating in had fundamentally changed. Surviving the crisis was one thing, thriving in this new world was another. Jocko knew that adapting wasn't enough. Something bolder was needed. The post-pandemic world was ripe with opportunity, but it was also filled with risk. Markets were shifting, consumer behaviors had changed, and the landscape of industries had transformed. What had worked before would no longer guarantee success. This wasn't a time for caution, it was a time for calculated boldness. Jocko introduced a new strategy: flood the field. It was about taking aggressive, decisive action to not only recover, but to lead the way forward. The philosophy behind it was simple: massive, disciplined action in all areas of life and business. If the world had changed, leaders couldn't just follow. They had to take initiative and shape the future. This meant investing in innovation, launching new projects, and testing new strategies. It was about pushing beyond the safe and familiar. Innovation wasn't optional. It was the only way to grow in a landscape that had been forever altered. But this approach came with risks. Resources were tight, teams were exhausted, and the stakes were high. Yet, Jocko saw risk differently. Calculated risks, grounded in discipline and accountability, were the key to thriving. Leaders who embraced flood the field understood that playing it safe wasn't the answer. They took bold steps, making moves others were too cautious to attempt. Some launched new products, others restructured their teams, bringing in fresh talent and ideas. And while not every move succeeded, the spirit of innovation reignited energy and momentum. But Jocko's message was clear: ownership extends to bold action as well. Leaders had to take responsibility not just for the safe choices, but for the risky ones too. Success wasn't guaranteed, but the lessons learned from each failure were invaluable. And in the world of extreme ownership, every outcome was a stepping stone toward growth. This was the next evolution of Jocko's philosophy. Extreme ownership wasn't just about navigating chaos, it was about thriving in uncertainty. Those who flooded the field, who took disciplined action despite the risks, were the ones who emerged stronger. And so, the challenge for leaders in this new world was simple. Adaptation was no longer enough. To lead, they had to act, boldly, decisively, relentlessly. Chapter 5: Leadership Beyond the Battlefield. As Jocko Willink's philosophy spread, his teachings began to reach far beyond the military and corporate worlds. Extreme ownership was no longer just for Navy SEALs or CEOs. It was a way of thinking that everyday people could apply in their lives, their families, their communities. But as Jocko continued to lead, he realized something essential. Leadership wasn't just about how you led yourself, it was about how you empowered others to lead. This realization came from his days as a SEAL commander, where success on the battlefield depended on a principle called decentralized command. In combat, one leader couldn't be everywhere, making every decision. Instead, teams had to be trained to think and act independently, to take ownership of their part of the mission and execute with full accountability. In the civilian world, this principle applied just as strongly. Imagine a business in the throes of recovery, uncertain of its next steps. It's easy for leaders to try to hold on to control, to make every decision themselves, and to micromanage their teams. But Jocko knew this approach was a recipe for disaster. The world was too chaotic, too fast-moving for any one person to steer the entire ship alone. So Jocko's next lesson was clear: empower others to lead. He began to teach businesses, organizations, and even families the power of decentralized leadership. It wasn't enough to be a strong leader. You had to build leaders at every level. This meant trusting your team to make decisions, encouraging initiative, and holding everyone accountable for their results. For many leaders, this was a difficult shift. They had spent years operating with centralized control, holding tightly to decision-making power. But Jocko showed them that true leadership was about building a structure where leadership was distributed across the entire team. Imagine a company facing a new set of challenges. Instead of waiting for the CEO to give orders, individual team members took the initiative, aligned their actions with the company's mission, and solved problems at their level. These weren't just managers, they were empowered leaders, each taking ownership of their role in the success of the organization. In the world of extreme ownership, everyone is responsible, everyone leads. Jocko's message resonated beyond the boardroom. Parents began to apply decentralized leadership in their homes, teaching their children accountability and empowering them to make decisions. Teachers used it in their classrooms, encouraging students to take ownership of their learning. Communities adopted it to rebuild trust and responsibility from the ground up. The ripple effect of extreme ownership was undeniable. By building leaders everywhere, Jocko was creating a world where leadership wasn't confined to titles or ranks. It was a mindset that anyone could adopt. And in a world still reeling from uncertainty, this mindset wasn't just valuable, it was transformative. Chapter 6. The Path Forward. As the world began to emerge from the chaos of the pandemic, the lessons of Stoicism and extreme ownership became more critical than ever. But Jocko Willink knew that the journey didn't end with survival. The greatest challenge wasn't just rebuilding, it was staying vigilant in a world that would forever be unpredictable. Jocko's mantra evolved: stay vigilant, stay humble, stay disciplined. This wasn't just a call to arms. It was a reminder that complacency was the real enemy. It would be easy for leaders, businesses, and individuals to relax as the immediate crisis faded. But Jocko knew that the habits built in the darkest days of 2020, the early wake-ups, the relentless focus, the disciplined ownership of every outcome, weren't just temporary solutions. They were the foundation for long-term growth. Discipline is freedom, Jocko repeated, but now the meaning went even deeper. Discipline wasn't just about getting through a pandemic or navigating uncertainty. It was about creating a life where you were in control, no matter what storms came your way. Jocko also began to emphasize the balance between discipline and creativity. While his philosophy was rooted in structure and self-control, he knew that growth required adaptability. Innovation wasn't a departure from discipline, it was an extension of it. With a strong foundation, leaders could take risks, explore new ideas, and evolve with the changing world. For those who had embraced extreme ownership, the future was bright. They had weathered the storm, but more importantly, they had built something unshakable within themselves: the ability to lead, adapt, and grow through whatever came next. But Jocko's warning was clear. The path forward is long, and the work never ends. Success can breed comfort, and comfort can breed complacency. For Jocko, success wasn't an endpoint. It was merely another phase of the journey. The real challenge was staying sharp, continuing to lead, and never allowing discipline to slip. And so, Jocko's message carried on. Stay vigilant, stay humble, stay disciplined. The world will always be uncertain. The storms will keep coming. But those who embrace the Stoic principles of self-control, resilience, and discipline will not only survive, they will thrive. For Jocko, the mission was never just about leading in a crisis. It was about creating a life and a world where extreme ownership is the bedrock of every decision, every action, and every success. The journey is far from over, but those who have embraced the path now know They are ready for whatever comes next.